It's a pleasure for our South American Environment, Science, Technology and Health Office to have this interview with Dr. Michel Leroux, a meteorology expert from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Climate Prediction Center in the United States. Dr. Leroux is in Lima as part of a workshop seminar organized by the Peruvian National Meteorology and Hydrology Service and hosted by the U.S. Embassy in Lima through its Press Affairs Office. Okay. Dr. Leroux, as I mentioned earlier, it's a pleasure to have you here with us and that you are able to share with us a few minutes from your time to learn more about the work that you do and the outlook for our region. To begin with, we would like to know more about your experience in meteorology issues, particularly on El Niño phenomena. Also, we would like to know if you have been or have made any research project in another country in Latin America.
So I am a meteorologist in the development branch at NOAA Climate Prediction Center, and I am the El Niño La Niña team lead, which means I'm responsible for getting out the outlooks and describing where El Niño La Niña is. The NOAA Climate Prediction Center issues climate outlooks for monthly, seasonal, out to a year. And so El Niño La Niña is very important to us because it helps give information for those outlooks. El Niño and La Niña have global impacts. So certainly, here in Peru, there's a lot of attention given to the status of El Niño and La Niña. And we focus primarily on kind of the U.S. impacts, but I know that there are several agencies within Peru that also monitor El Niño and La Niña, and they give more local impacts to this region. So I think we all kind of look at each other's outlooks and try and come up with the best forecast that we can.
What is the impact of climate change in this weather phenomena? What will be the future effects of its recurrence and strength? Are there any alternatives that could mitigate these impacts? What countries in our region do you view as the ones with the highest vulnerability?
Well, at this point in time, the scientific community in the U.S. and also internationally, I think, for the most part, we're not clear on how El Niño La Niña will change under climate change. There are a lot of ideas. Maybe the intensity, the strength of El Niño La Niña may change, but right now there's no consensus or no agreement on how it will change. In fact, a lot of models that the IPCC uses disagree on whether it will become more intense or more frequent. There's a lot of it's a research topic, and it's one that people are investigating. Mm-hmm. As for mitigation, no ideas on how to mitigate that if we don't know how to change it. I think it's important, though, to note that climate change, by itself, without any change in El Niño La Niña, could potentially change the climate a little bit. And so, in other words, if you have a background change in temperature or rainfall, and then you put El Niño or La Niña on top of it, mm-hmm. It could kind of modify the impact if you have two things working at the same time. So, for instance, El Niño tends to lead to drought in the Andes in particular, and one of the climate projections is for wetter conditions. So maybe that means El Niño in the future might lead to less severe drought in that region. So it would be working together because there's a lot of climate phenomena that we have to look at. In terms of vulnerability, I think that the 97, 98 El Niño certainly was a guide what kind of impacts could happen in Peru. Before that, the 82, 83 event. Now, those are very big events, and it's important to note that El Niños they're not all that strong. We've had events since then that have been much weaker, and so they don't come necessarily with the same sort of impacts. So the strength of El Niño, particularly for Peru, matters, but it's important to be prepared for the stronger events in addition to the weaker events. You just want to be aware of what the status of El Niño and La Niña are.
Okay. There are a number of predictions on the impacts of weather phenomena, as you said before, such as El Niño for our region. In your opinion, how certain are these predictions, and what mechanisms or tools are there available to generate predictions that are closer to our reality on these impacts? Mm-hmm. How used are concepts such as climate risk analysis in the United States and in our region to predict these weather phenomena?
That's a long question.
Yeah.
Let me take it one part at a time. At this time, we at NOAA Climate Prediction Center, we issue outlooks for El Niño La Niña going out to 8 months. Mm-hmm. All right, and the value or the success of those outlooks depends actually on the time of year. So if you're in the southern hemisphere fall, mm-hmm. or northern hemisphere spring, the value and the prediction of those El Niño and La Niña models tends to go down. Yeah. So it's much harder to make a forecast in the southern hemisphere fall, northern hemisphere spring. As you go into like June and July, it starts to get a little bit easier. The amount of success the models has gets better. So there's certainly a very strong seasonal dependence on it. In it. Usually we see El Niño and La Niñas form in kind of the spring and summer, sometimes as late as the fall, but usually we can see them coming. And that's actually one of the reasons that we can predict impacts, is that we can see it coming earlier in the year. And so even if you don't predict the exact month of its transition, say it transitions in June, you still have time, because the greatest impacts associated with El Niño and La Niña don't occur until the southern hemisphere summer or the northern hemisphere winter. Mm-hmm. So it gives you time to prepare. So, I mean, we're always looking for new research and new ideas. You know, perhaps even in Peru, they're investigating ideas of how we can extend El Niño and La Niña forecasts even further into the future. It's a topic I'm involved in at NOAA Climate Prediction Center, as to what extent can we make our forecasts better even further in advance.
Okay. Finally, if you could please provide us with an overview of the trend of this phenomena over the last 10 years and the future projections of its impact for Peru and South America for the next decade.
At this time, we don't know how El Niño and La Niña will change over the next decade. There's just no agreement among scientists over exactly if the intensity would change or how frequent it would occur. There's no agreement on that. There are model projections that IPCC puts together, and certainly those need to be examined. These are model projections for like temperature and precipitation, independent of El Niño and La Niña. So certainly, you know, examine those, and you know, and keep in mind, if the projection says that the next, you know, 10, 20, 30 years is going to get wetter, then that means that it's going to modify the El Niño and La Niña impact.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Sí. Yeah. Okay, we hope this information will be of interest to all of our friends in the region. We will be uploading this interview to our webpage, riosouthamerica.com, where you will be also able to find more information related to environment, science, technology, and health relevant to our South American region. Once again, we would like to thank you, Dr. Leroux, and all of you for joining us.
Thank you.